Hey, it's your man Andrew Wood, and today I'm going to be talking about female gamers. Now, I know Sterling Bones and the Reuben have done videos on this fairly recently, and it's something I've been planning to do long before that. I think it was submitted as a video response to the Reuben, as I think he was the first person in the community actually did touch on this. I think both of you guys sort of mentioned that you had always great experiences and great female players. Well, I played with, a bare minimum of 50 female gamers in the time I've been playing, and I played with some really good ones. However, I played with some that were absolutely horrible as well. Let me start off with the worst kind of player you can ever run into in a game, in my estimation. That is the girlfriend. And I don't mean a girl who is someone's girlfriend that goes, wow, this hobby sounds wonderful, fascinating. Thanks for introducing me to it. I'd really love to give it a try and a play, and learns and plays and is a player. No, I'm not talking about her. I'm talking about the needy, clingy girl that has to be drug along by her boyfriend to the game, has no interest in being there, is not necessarily smart or creative, and has no desire to play, will probably fall asleep during the middle of the game, will whine and complain, and will do things that are ridiculous from time to time when she actually feels like being bothered to do something. But the majority of the time won't be bothered to do anything at all, and will never learn the system. She'll roll and go, oh, what do I do here, what do I do here? And it's the 4,000th time she's played, and you can begin to become very fed up and sick of that lack of interest of trying. I want to give you an example of the girlfriend, the worst player that I ever played with. Her name was Corey. Her boyfriend was Chris. They were playing in this game with a really rather bad game master who needed strong players, and Chris was the better of the players that I could role play with in the group, so it made it all the more frustrating. She was playing something called a Tibbet, which is apparently a halfling that can shapeshift into a cat. I have no idea. It's a 3.5 D&D game, and we're in a place just laden with traps. Fortunately for me, I always sell things, and I really love to sell for any sort of healing. And there was this sort of like fountain of curative magic. Now I went into there and I'm just like going over it, like, I'm just thinking about it in my head how wonderful that feels. I'm like selling and explaining, over myself how wonderful this feels to me, and my joints and my bones, talking about all these old injuries that are just completely popping themselves out, being submerged for minutes in continuous healing. Just think about the effects of glucosamine and chondroitamine on the old joints, and just how wonderful continuous positive energy would be. Now, this is a heavily trap-laden place, so I'm not going to start on that, because traps, for the most part, are just stupid, and these were just completely stupid traps. But we know this already, so she turns into cat form and just runs down the hallway, sets off this huge, vast fire explosion, and kills everyone, except for me, because I'm submersed in positive energy at the time. And afterwards, she's tried to do, you guys take the game too seriously, and she was, of course, happy that she'd ruined the game so that she wouldn't have to play anymore, and her boyfriend wouldn't be playing either, which she wanted to do. Of course, he starts yelling at her, and it's a bad time for everybody, and that's absolutely terrible. And Corey, horrible player. Don't ever let her play in your game. Now, I have also played with female players that were very, very excellent. Best female player I ever played with my wife. She is an absolutely excellent player. She started a mage game for me in 2004, and we still play periodically. Now she's a university professor. We don't really have that much time to play over the last several years, but we'll play at least a few times a year, and the games are great. She really sort of helped me redefine what... First of all, I really learned how to actually portray and play female characters from watching the way that she did it, and taking those characters, sort of mimicking them and breaking them down and understanding them, sort of giving them a role-playing vivisection and examining the pieces there, figuring out how, as a man, I'm going to be able to portray female characters, which is very, very important for a game master to be able to do. And one of the things I started doing in my games since then is, whenever I think of a character, I usually, okay, this guy, and I go, oh, wait a minute, what if instead of a guy, he was a she? How would that change the character around? And I take and start examining that, and often I come up with an even more interesting character. Sometimes it's better for him to be a guy, and a guy, he will stay, but sometimes it's better that we flip that character into a female, and that creates a very different character, which can be very interesting. But really what I learned from her are NPCs are the most important thing a game master can do. Before that, I thought it was plot. It is not plot. It are NPCs. When NPCs are practically real, they're so incredibly well rendered and intricate. Now, of course, my wife has a doctorate in psychology. And understanding psychology is pretty much the basic block for building characters. So, no difficulty to understand that her characters are the best. NPCs are better than the PCs of anyone that I've ever seen, better than NPCs of anyone I've ever seen, and probably the top 20, 25 characters on my list going all the way down are like hers for the NPCs for the game. They're wonderful. She does exceptionally talented voice. She could do the voice for like a show like The Simpsons. She could do like that many different voices, guy voices, girl voices, little girl voices, all kinds of different voices. Really superb talent in that area. But the game is really more about the politics of the Chantry, the drama. Kind of almost looks like a Real World or Jersey Shores meets a World of Darkness more than the typical sort of game, which you might think, oh, that sounds horrible. It is absolutely not horrible. It was absolutely wonderful because you get such deep interpersonal relationships, and the characters, the NPCs, mean so much in the game that it really creates a very interesting, different dynamic, and by far, the best game I've ever played in. Also, the game I played the most. I mean, we put a lot of hours on that game. Now, I also played with one. I was up in Fairfax. Another girl named Kelly. She ran the Mask of Relative, and she ran the whole thing. Somehow I survived from the very beginning to the end. Of course, turned to cultist, but she did a great job with that module. And at the end, she ran a module. It's like a one-shot deal with Japanese pro wrestling, and it was a Cthulhu module. And we did the game. So I'm playing my character, Big Tidy Muggers. I'm going to hold a video on this at some point because a gentleman gamer requested to do a video along this line. And I'm playing a pro wrestler, and she borrowed a bunch of Japanese wrestling footage from me, and she's studying it and asked me a bunch of questions in terms of what makes the match. And we're doing it all like that. Like I'm in the back talking the match over at the guy. We're in the ring, and she's talking about how we're kind of talking to each other a little bit in the ring, and her husband at the time, was playing my character manager. We cut a money promo, like I'm doing my promo, and then he comes in doing his stuff, and it was absolutely wonderful. And it was a great experience. One of the better one-shot games, maybe the best one-shot game, probably the best one-shot game I've ever played. It was absolutely fantastic. I loved it, and I'm going to do a whole video on that game. So another great experience there. I've seen and noted a lot of female players too tend to be wallflower type players. You have to pull them in and try to engage them more. I don't really like wallflower type players, but a lot of females are going to be in that role, particularly if they have less self-confidence. So something that you have to say, okay, am I willing to deal with this and to pull and to drag that person? Because wallflowers usually always kind of stay wallflowers. Sometimes you can have a breakthrough with that person, but when they're an adult, probably not. Now, that doesn't mean that they can't make some degree of contributions into the game, and having some females in the game I think is very good for a game overall, as it does make the hobby look less nerdy or geeky, and gives you maybe a more realistic portrayal. Like if you look at a fantasy style show or a gothic horror type show, there's always female characters in there, and I do not like dudes playing chicks in a game. It's just weird to me. I've seen too many weird things happen there, so I don't even allow that. But having those female players brings those characters in, and can really give you a very interesting mix of characters. Plus you can handle situations like romance elements like that even more in depth, more detail, and to be more interesting. Now, I've noticed certain things female players like. They don't tend to be power gamers. They don't care about the combat feats, all that sort of things. I like to buy skill focus, that sort of thing. And in a game where you can buy being good looking, female players are all about good looking. They will power the hell out of being good looking. They're like, oh hell yeah, I'm a scale of 1 to 10. I'm an 11. And that's what females want. They want to be pretty and attractive for the most part. Almost every female player I've seen has wanted to make her characters very good looking. And fair enough. So that is, for those guys that are looking to go, why would you pay all these points for attractiveness? Who would do that, girls? And I find girls don't really like the fantasy games or the dystopian games very much. Not that they won't play them or make the concession to play them. A lot of times your female players just can be the most agreeable and easy going in the group. But they tend to really gravitate towards the World of Darkness games, that sort of gothic horror, the modern aspect of the game, the romantic nature of the game. Those games seem to really appeal to female players. And I think with movies like Twilight and all the books and such that are written in those genres, that we're going to see even more in the next 3 to 5 years, even more of these tween and teenage girls that love this stuff coming up and finding Vampire the Requiem on a bookshelf somewhere and going, what's this? What's this about? I want to get into this. This sounds awesome. I can actually portray these vampires or the female human love interests of them in a game, and they might be very happy to do that. And I think we're going to see a even larger swell from particularly Vampire, but the World of Darkness games in general, of female players coming into those over the next few years because of a movie like that I know many people are going to malign and hate on. And it's, for me, I just feel like it's not for me. I'm a 33-year-old dude. I'm not entertained by that watching it. But I'm not going to hate on it. And hell, if it puts people in a mindset to get into World of Darkness, get into role-playing games, I'm great with it. because that's some good we can bring over. So we'll look at Twilight. Now let's distill it. What are the elements they like there? The aspect of having two powerful men, and the woman, they really like a man who is excellent. And if you have two excellent men, as personified as a vampire and a werewolf, trying to go after her, trying to acquire her, the ungettable nature of both of them, the ungettable nature of her, the aspect of the unrequited love, the lust, the immortality, the romance, and the undercurrent of lust that are all associated with these things, the beauty, the elegance. All of those aspects are really going to find purchase to female players in a fantasy type setting. You want to really describe things like the strange, bizarre, the put a lot of time into developing your merchants so you can really role play these guys out and give her those scenes where she can really get her shopping on. I find a lot of female players like to do that, and that can develop interest for them. Have the fairy king come after them, try to maybe seduce them, and scenes where they're dancing together, and that sort of thing. If you have those different levels of characters that are coming after them in that romantic context, they're probably going to respond well to that. And you'll find, at least I do, my players call me all the time between games, and I find my female players often call me the most. They're on the phone the longest, trying to get more information, trying to say, "Oh, can we do this? Can I try this? What if I did this? What about this?" And like 2 hours later, I'm like, "Yeah, I have to get off the phone. It's just enough." And that's not just female players, but all my players. I don't know if you guys get that, but they blow my phone up. Those are some of the things that I find female players really like to engage in, and the kind of styles that they like. Don't overdo it, but the damsel in distress kind of thing, if you worked in like one time in a campaign, a female player is probably really going to get with that. Everybody kind of running over to save her and such, when she's been jacked by her bad guys, and it gives a good little win to the bad guys too. So always getting the wins on the bad guys is good. Don't overuse it. Don't just do it to death, because it'll get stock and old. But you can throw something like in there one time, and it makes for an interesting unity in the party. I've found that always works, but just one time a campaign, usually I'll throw that in there. And overall, I find the female players really like to look at the details and the pretty things. Describe the gems to them, or really give them pictures. Just download things off the internet and say, okay, well, this is what your magic wand looks like. Give them pictures for like the period style dresses or what have you, so they can get into those details and describe how their character wants to look. You're gonna have a different style of players. You have your kind of like anime girls that like the cutesy stuff. You'll have your girls that like the vampire sort of things, and you're the big readers, and you're gonna come in. And you should kind of always look at someone's character sheet and break it down, and you can sort of begin to devise what they're trying to go after, what things are going to be fun for them. Overall, I definitely encourage people to try to bring more female players into the hobby, and I think that is good for our hobby. I think it keeps us healthy as a whole. So that is definitely something I'd like to see. The best player, my number one pick, if you were to run a game for me right now, a girl named Lana. Her and I had wonderful chemistry when we played together. We didn't talk about our characters, just boom, sat down, played our characters. They always matched up, always worked well, and it wasn't a thing where she was necessarily easy to work with everyone else, because another player in particular, she would always have problems. But her and I, wonderful chemistry, and it's really a special thing when you find great chemistry with another player, particularly over multiple characters or multiple games and years of play, because we gamed together for like 6 years, I think. So I really enjoyed that, and that's. Another thing I found about female players, I like to often play like the buffing type classes, the healing type classes, to be able to help and support characters. Bards, the healer class in D&D, and not necessarily the fighter types, although some do, and the ones that do seem to like rangers for some reason. So that's really, I'd like to weigh in on female gaming, and I'll probably post as a response to the Nerubbin. And let me know what you think, if you played with the girlfriend type, or what your experiences have been with playing with female players, and if you, like myself, wish to bring more females into the hobby.